Hello, and welcome to the Pentester Academy webinar. I'm Andrea Donlevy, and I will be your host during this webcast. In just a few moments, we will go to John Gamble from Corelight, who will be discussing network security's best kept secret, Bro. John is the Director of Marketing at Corelight and has a decade of experience working in the data protection industry, representing privacy, security, and identity verification products, including his most recent role as Director of Product Marketing at Lookout, a mobile endpoint security company. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit it in a chat window to all panelists. All questions will be held until the end of the webinar during our Q&A portion, and we will answer as many as we can with the time provided. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, and it looks like we are ready, so I'll hand it over to John.
Thank you for that introduction. Now for today's webcast, a technical introduction to Bro, network security's best kept secret. I'm John Gamble again, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Corelight. We'll talk a little bit at the end about what Corelight does, but really today's presentation is about Bro, the open source network security monitoring software. Our agenda today, first we'll talk about the world that you might be operating in as a security professional without Bro in your environment. Next, we'll start to introduce ourselves to Bro and what its capabilities are. In the third section, we'll actually look in pretty specific technical detail and use case examples of exactly how Bro can give you better network data than some of the network data you might be using today. And lastly, we'll talk about Corelight for a little bit and just give you a picture of what we as a company can offer with relation to Bro. And at the end, we'll have a question and answer period. So save your questions for the end, and I will be happy to answer them. A world without Bro. It's a sad world. This picture often makes people in the security world laugh because it kind of represents what a lot of SIEMs, security incident event management systems, look like today. You know, you've got all your data in one place, but it's not necessarily well organized. It doesn't interconnect well. It's coming from a variety of different places, and it's all kind of thrown into one room, if you will. And it's hard to make fast decisions and get fast insight out of a room that's organized like this. And it's not really a fault of the SIEM per se. It's really about the varying data structures and varying data sources that you're relying on as a security incident responder or threat hunter or security architect to understand your environment. And it's just getting data from all these different places, and it just doesn't talk well with each other. So if you look at kind of the sources of data that you could be putting into your SIEM or a data lake, if you will, you've got network traffic data, data coming off of your live network traffic. You've got host data, that's data about your endpoints in your environment, like your PCs and laptops running in your corporate environment, organizational environment. Logs generated by any number of systems in that environment, reporting on various activities within those systems. And then intelligence feeds from either internal intelligence sources or third-party threat intelligence feeds. These are typically the four types of data that you're putting into a SIEM or a data lake. But really today's presentation, we're going to talk about network traffic data because that's what Bro is squarely focused on. And I'd argue that network traffic data is probably among the most important of those data sources, if not the most important in many cases. And that's because hosts, endpoints are great sources of information if they're reliable. But at the end of the day, they can be compromised, and the reliability of what they're telling you can be compromised as well. Network traffic is network traffic. It can't lie. Certainly bad guys try to hide inside of network traffic by doing tricky things like hiding in non-standard ports. But at the end of the day, all attacks really have to go through the network, and it's pretty policy neutral data that's passing through in the sense of it is what it is. So when you're looking at your network traffic data sources today, and I'm assuming that you're probably not using the Bro Network Security Monitor as a data source for your network traffic, you're probably dealing with a couple of different things. So that's that middle column, right? You might be collecting PCAP on a rolling basis. Some people collect PCAP, which is full network traffic packet capture, where you're literally collecting every bit and byte crossing the wire. It's 100% of what's happening on the network traffic, but it's a ton of data, and it can be very difficult to make sense of. And you can't store it for long because of the cost. So most people are storing it for at most 30 to 90 days at scale. You might also be using NetFlow, which is a data source that describes at a high level communications going across the network, the kind of who talking to who and when, bits of metadata, a phone call record, if you will. And you might also be using a whole range of logs being generated by your various systems and servers inside of your network. You know, DNS servers generate DNS logs. You might be getting FTP logs from your FTP servers, et cetera. And that's probably what you're using today in terms of network traffic data source. And it can be really challenging to interrelate all of these various data sources together to make sense of what's happening on your network. And there are consequences to this bad jigsaw puzzle that you kind of accept as an unavoidable puzzle you have to solve, but it's really not. And we'll talk about how Bro can really change the way you approach this problem. But if you're not using Bro, you're probably trying to assemble this jigsaw puzzle. If you're an incident responder and you're trying to respond to a security alert generated by maybe an IDS system, you know, you're probably familiar with this puzzle solving exercise. And the challenges with this, of course, are that you've got blind spots. You don't have all of your bases covered. Some of your data sources don't give you enough information about what's happening. Like Netflow, for example, is really only going to give you a high-level call record of who's talking to who. It's not going to tell you what they're talking about, which is critically important. You know, another one is it's just going to slow your overall response time, whether that's threat hunting or incident response or just general, you know, security defense where you're trying to make adjustments to your environment to better defend yourself. If you don't have great data and you're spending time trying to connect the dots between different data types, it's going to slow your response time. And response time is critical in the world of security, right? You need to be able to respond fast and identify attacks as early as possible, and also respond and remediate to successful attacks as quickly as possible. So you're exposing yourself to more risk if you're only relying on data sources like these. And then lastly, if people go undetected on your network, typically large-scale breaches, sophisticated breaches take weeks, months, or years for the attackers to successfully carry out in some cases. And bad visibility on your network because you don't have the right data sources that you can interconnect, those attacks are going to go undetected for longer and ultimately cause more damage in your organization. So what's Bro? It's kind of a funny name, I'll admit. It's actually a very old, by many comparisons of modern technology, open source framework. It was invented in 1995, so over 20 years ago, by a gentleman named Vern Paxson at Berkeley. And Vern was trying to basically understand really high volume throughput network traffic running through Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory at the time, and an environment, a national lab that was facing threat actors in 1995 that most organizations couldn't even fathom. Today, more commonplace, especially among larger Fortune 2000 companies. But back then, national labs connected to the internet were a target and were doing high volume traffic throughput. And Vern realized that no tool existed to really parse and understand that network traffic at scale for security analysis and for understanding the network environment. So he invented and wrote the kind of initial framework for Bro. I said it's kind of a funny name. It actually stands for Big Brother. It was meant as a warning because, of course, as all monitoring technology can be, it can be used for good or evil if you're not using it correctly in your environment. So he named it Bro as kind of a warning about its dual capability set and a reminder to be responsible with the software. And Bro at its heart does three key things. Number one, it generates comprehensive protocol-specific logs for all of your traffic. So there are over 35 different protocols that Bro analyzes today. The neat thing about Bro is if you want to analyze a new protocol, like a Bitcoin mining protocol, you can write and modify Bro to do that. It's very flexible. But the number one thing that most people use Bro for is to generate these really rich descriptive logs that comprehensively summarize what's happening on the wire. The second thing Bro can do that's important for security context is file extraction. So, every day, depending on the size of your organization, you could have tens, hundreds, or hundreds of thousands of files, if you're big enough, crossing the network, PDFs, JPEGs, EXE files, etc. And often, in many cases, those files can be a problem in a security context when it comes to attacks, right? Payloads are often delivered through files. And so file analysis is a really critical aspect of security. Bro helps you get all of those files crossing the network, extracts them and reassembles them and allows you to store them in a location for later forensic analysis, or you can put those files directly into a file analysis tool. And the third thing that Bro does is it allows for analysis automation. You can automate analysis on top of all of those logs and files that Bro is looking at and generating and extracting Bro is actually a scripting language unto itself. It's a unique scripting language, and Bro scripts are basically scripts that you can program yourself once you understand how to program in Bro to do pretty much anything you can conceive of within the scope of the data Bro collects. So you can do things like Bro looks at files. When it extracts files, it takes a measurement of the file's entropy. And you can actually write a script if you wanted that said, if the entropy of a file increases, then send me an alert. And that might be evidence of a ransomware attack, because ransomware typically is encrypting files, and that's resulting in a higher entropy measurement on that file. So number 3 is often overlooked, I would say, in some of the Bro community, just because the richness of the data in number 1 and number 2 is so powerful. But for the power users of Bro today who are really using number 3, it's an incredibly powerful functionality of Bro. One organization we know of has written over 80 unique Bro scripts inside their environment that are uniquely tailored to what they've observed in their network over many, many years of analysis. And so it really gives them really high fidelity alerts and monitoring capabilities that go well beyond kind of traditional commercial IDS or IPS solutions. So quickly, how does Bro work? Bro needs to get a copy of the network traffic. It doesn't plug in directly into the traffic itself. It's not an inline software, so you actually have to generate a copy of that live network traffic via a span port or a packet broker or a optical tap. But once Bro gets a copy of that live network traffic, it's basically, it's a protocol parsing engine. So I mentioned it can parse over 35 different protocols. It also has a script interpreter, so it can read and execute against Bro scripts if you're looking to do custom analysis against those logs. And it also does file extraction, as I mentioned. So at the top there, you see what are some of the use cases of how people are using Bro. Well, they're using Bro to hunt for threats in their environment. They're using it for file extraction to send to file analysis frameworks. They're using it for forensics. You can also use Bro for things like vulnerability tracking, because Bro actually generates, as part of the network traffic analysis, logs that describe the version and type of software being used in your environment. So quickly, just to recap those 3 things Bro does. Bro, it's a comprehensive network logging tool. It takes raw network traffic and transforms it into rich network protocol specific logs. The screenshots you see here are, you can't read them, they're too small, but that's okay. They're actually representative of actual Bro logs. So there's a DNS log in there, there's a files log, there's an FTP log. Each of those fields, those white and gray boxes, are data points that Bro collects and packages within those logs. And it does it for all traffic all the time, as long as you're enabling Bro. So you get this really rich historical record of what happened. And the connection log here on the left that's zoomed in on a bit is kind of like your NetFlow record, except it's NetFlow on steroids. You can see immediately by the size of that log file that you're already getting a ton of rich information that's not included in a typical NetFlow record. We'll talk more about that in detail a little bit later. Second point, right? Bro is a file extraction tool, so it can extract and reassemble files off the wire. Any file type, it's really not limited at all in that respect. And it also generates a separate log that goes with files called the files log, which has that entropy measurement that I mentioned earlier. And lastly, Bro is a scripting tool, right? You can program Bro to basically do whatever you want it to do in terms of analysis, monitoring, and detection. So today, there are actually over 60 community Bro scripts in the open source world on GitHub. So you could go there today, you could set up your Bro instance, and you could start trying out some of these scripts that other developers in the open source Bro community have contributed. For example, there's one script called the JA3 script. It was written by a few developers at Salesforce, and they've used this script to generate SSL client fingerprints. So that it's a really useful script because it basically allows you to track the use of SSL clients within your environment, and you can start doing things like whitelisting and blacklisting certain SSL clients that you know are bad or you know are good and you want to whitelist. So very helpful script, very popular script among the 60 that are available. Deployment of Bro, I talked a little bit about this. Again, it's an out-of-band solution. It's not inline, so you need to download the software and then configure it on your own hardware if you're going to run an open source implementation of Bro. So Bro is just software. To actually get it to run, you're going to need to buy and configure your own server platform to run it on. But you've got to get a copy of traffic to Bro. So again, packet broker, tap, span port, etc., gives you that copy of that traffic. And you can export those Bro logs to really anywhere you like. SIM, analytics, whatever data lake you might have. You can put the extracted files in storage, or you can send them to a file analysis framework like Palo Alto Networks or FireEye, for example. And as you see here, it's positioned against IDS, IPS, and NetFlow and PCAP. It's often not a replacement in any sense for those solutions. It's complementary and really fills a lot of holes left by those solutions, and also accelerates some of those solutions like IDS or IPS, where your incident responders are now getting alerts from the IDS solution, looking in their SIM, and now they can resolve incidents way faster because they have bro logs to understand exactly what happened and if that alert is a true positive or a false positive. So really quickly, bro makes incident response faster. It unlocks new threat hunting capabilities, and really the way we think about it is it's rocket fuel for both your people and your tools. So when you have better data and you have better visibility about your network environment, you can move faster and do more things more efficiently and more effectively with bro. And we also see some leading organizations starting to build bro into a network security stack that looks pretty different from a lot of other companies out there. And we think this is probably the future of what this, where this is headed, which is that bro is really the foundational layer of network visibility that transforms the raw traffic into human readable, but also machine readable data that gets pumped up into the other systems that layer on top, such as a SIM, security analytics platform, orchestration and automation platforms, and ultimately investigation and hunting by your threat hunters. So, when you start at that base layer with bro and you give rich, comprehensive, usable data, everything upstream gets better. And we're seeing a lot of companies start to do this. We said bro is the best kept secret in network security. It's funny, it's widely used. There are thousands and thousands of organizations out there using open source bro in their environment. But knowledge of bro at an individual level is still, not widespread. I would say, most security professionals may have heard of bro, but it's a minority that really know and understand how to use bro. And so, we want to encourage, obviously, the use of bro, but spread knowledge because it's such a powerful framework. And all of these companies you see here on screen are actively using bro in their environment, and we know this from public sources. So this is data that was obtained from mailing lists or job posts or public talks. So these are all just a sample of some of the thousands of companies that are using bro. How does bro give you better data? We like to say bro is the Goldilocks between NetFlow and PCAP. This table you see here, didn't actually, we didn't make it. This comes from a gentleman named Chris Sanders, founder of Applied Network Defense. He's a great, leading mind in security training and building, security teams, and he runs a great training course as well, which you can visit at www.investigationtheory.com. And so he put this chart together, and he was basically trying to show his students how varying types of network data compare. And the first thing you'll notice is that you can kind of split the two into two types, right? There's types that are specific, like VPN access logs. Well, that's only going to give you data about VPN access logs. That's very narrow network visibility. And then there's a few classes of network data that are very broad in scope. You've got PCAP, which is literally all the data crossing your network. It's as broad as it gets. There's NetFlow, and then there's bro logs. And you'll notice something interesting, which is bro is almost a straight A student in his graph, or in his chart here, rather. NetFlow gets very poor grades for contexts because it doesn't tell you that much about what's happening. And PCAP gets a C in search because it's just way too much data to effectively search at scale, and a D in retention because it costs a boatload to store if you're doing it at scale. Bro gets a C in acquisition, but that he's talking here about the open source implementation of bro, which yes, it can be quite challenging to implement and acquire the data from bro. It takes weeks or months to set up an open source bro instance if you're in a complex environment. Smaller environments or test labs, it's much quicker. And bro really helps along 5 axes in terms of network data. So it's the breadth of what you're seeing, it's the speed with which you can search it, it's the file extraction capability that comes with it, and it's dynamic protocol detection, which is a new term. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but basically bro is very sophisticated in how it understands what kind of traffic belongs in what protocol, and can catch things like bad guys trying to hide themselves in non-standard ports, for example. I'll talk more about how bro does that, but that's what that point means there. And lastly, scriptability, which we've talked about, right? You can actually write your own scripts or use community scripts to make Bro do your bidding and do whatever, automate whatever analysis task you'd like. On the comprehensiveness side, we talked about the logs. Over 400 data fields are extracted by Bro across all of these logs. So we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of data fields. And the really neat thing about Bro is, unlike some other DPI-like libraries that are used for analyzing network traffic, Bro was purpose-built for security professionals. It was built by security professionals, designed by security professionals. That means all of these data fields and all of these logs are specifically for security folks. So if a data point's in there, it's because it's useful for someone in security, not necessarily like network performance, for example. Here's a great example of where you can see the depth difference. So on the top, in the color with the colored fields, you see a Bro DNS log. So this is the actual information you would see in a DNS log from Bro. The bottom, you have an example of a DNS server log. Already you can see that Bro is giving you a lot more information here. So you're getting things like the 5-tuple call record, so a full account of the call record, the round trip time, which can help you understand things like latency that might be happening in the system, and in purple there, the content of the response, which is hugely important because in a DNS server log, you're not actually getting the response of what was said, which is critically important in a security context. So already you can see the depth difference that Bro logs offer. Speed of search, up to 20 times faster. That figure actually came from someone we worked with who had never used Bro before and stood up Bro and took his average incident response time down from about 3.5 hours to about 5 minutes. A dramatic increase in his ability to respond to security alerts being generated in his environment. It really is rocket fuel for your environment. Things that make it fast to search, it's uniform, right? All of these fields have been purpose-built and designed by security professionals. The logs are interlinked, so there's unique connection IDs that allow you to very quickly pivot from log to log to log and trace exactly what happened across the wire across different protocols, which is a great feature of Bro that allows for very fast movement. And also, each file gets a unique file ID, and Bro auto hashes the files themselves. So in a Bro log, for example, if you see in an HTTP log, for example, that a file was downloaded and you click on that hash, you could auto look that up via something like VirusTotal, and you could very quickly understand, okay, someone visited a website, a file was downloaded, and then you go to VirusTotal and you could find out, oh, that file is malicious. You know, that you could do that all in a matter of literally seconds. So it's very, very fast for search. This is just a quick example of kind of an incident response investigation with and without Bro. On the left-hand side, if we imagine that maybe you're dealing with an IDS alert, you know, you've got to run through all these steps just to figure out what's going on with that alert and understand the scope of the breach and how to respond. There's a lot of chair pivots. You're going to be searching maybe through PCAP. You're going to have to make sense of which PCAP file you need. It's a lot of manual work, a lot of chair pivots. On the right with Bro, very simple. You just pivot off the connection ID, take a look at the files that may or may not have been downloaded, the HTTP logs. They'll show you, yep, a file was transferred. Quick check that hash. And then the great thing is you can take that hash, plug it back into the Bro logs and say, hey, did any other host download this file in my environment? Bro will tell you that immediately. File extraction, as we talked about, assembled and extracted and reassembled off the wire, and also generates a Bro file ID. So you can pivot within Bro logs and trace file activity or understand the scope of a file, how many people have downloaded it, as I just mentioned, very quickly. Dynamic protocol detection. I'll spend a little more time here since this is a new concept. So as you know, attackers, especially sophisticated attackers, have a lot of tricks up their sleeve on how to hide from detection. And one of those ways, right, is hiding in non-standard ports, putting traffic in, SSL that isn't actually SSL traffic, for example, or, et cetera. So this is an example of a Bro log, a Bro DPD log, which is a dynamic protocol detection log. So that's yet another log that Bro generates specifically around dynamic protocol detection. And if it detects that there's an issue, it generates this. And what you're seeing here in red is Bro was analyzing what, according to the header information, was an SSL connection. So encrypted communication. In many environments, that might be an ignored communication because it's encrypted and you can't drill into it. what Bro actually found is that that wasn't actually an SSL connection. It was an attacker trying to communicate back to their command and control center, trying to hide in an alleged SSL connection. But of course, the error message you see there, invalid version latent TLS connection, is what Bro triggered on to understand, you know what, this is not actually an SSL connection. And in this case, this was actually a real threat that was uncovered because of this log. So a real use case. Scriptability, lastly, again, Bro, as a scripting language, you really can do whatever your imagination allows you to envision with Bro and the data that it provides. So if you learn the Bro scripting language, it can become an incredibly powerful tool to fine-tune analysis and automation inside your environment on your network. Installing Bro scripts can be done now via Bro package manager that was released last year. So the open source community has made it very easy to get Bro scripts into Bro via that package manager. So it organizes all of the community scripts, those 60 plus Bro scripts I mentioned, into a nice package manager. So it makes it very easy for you. Here's a great example of a Bro script that you might find interesting, written by a gentleman named John Sewick. It's a Bitcoin detector, so it detects different Bitcoin activity or cryptocurrency, I should say, mining activity, Bitcoin, Litecoin, and PPP coin as well. So you can install this and basically understand if anyone in your environment is trying to use your network and your endpoints to do cryptocurrency mining, which in places like universities is really important to understand, because a lot of students think electricity is free and try to mine cryptocurrency at the expense of the college. So network security folks want to know about that. Corelight. So who is Corelight? Well, we've built a commercial product that makes Bro easy and enterprise grade. It means much faster time to deploy Bro in your environment, much higher performance than you're going to be able to achieve in an open source implementation. We've baked in a whole suite of enterprise integrations that make Bro really easy to integrate with all of your favorite tools like Splunk or Elastic. Comprehensive monitoring. So we've really spent a lot of time looking at how to manage and monitor these boxes. So you're going to get a lot of rich information about what's going on with your software and hardware, and just general ease of use and manageability. We've taken a lot of steps here to really make Bro a very simple plug-and-play solution. We have 3 appliances in market today by a range of network throughputs. So a 2 gigabit sensor, a 10 gigabit per second sensor, and a 25 gigabit per second sensor. I'll tell you now that in the open source world, the peak performance that we've seen large organizations with very talented security engineers achieve is somewhere between 3 to 4, sometimes 5 gigabits per second per server. So at the high end, you're looking at a 5 to 10x increase over what you can achieve in the open source world. And I'll talk a little bit about why we're able to achieve that as a company in the next slide. But performance is really a big one for a lot of the larger customers of Corelight, is the efficiency gains that come with our products. And if you compare Corelight to open source, because again, open source is free. We want more people using open source Bro. We think it's a great open source framework, and the world would be a better, safer place if more people used it. Why pay for Corelight when Bro is free? Well, there's quite a number of reasons why our customers have bought our products. They really fall into the categories you see at left: deployment, performance, integration, monitoring, management. With Corelight, you're going to get things like automated SIM export. So you can literally just log into our web app, type in a few bits of information about, say, your Splunk instance, click a button, and you're off and running, and you've exported your Bro logs directly to Splunk. It takes all of 5 minutes. In the open source world, that's going to take some time. You're going to have to set it up. You're going to have to clean some of the data fields and reformat them for Splunk. It's going to take you some time. And you see deployment there at the top, right? Our appliances really are plug-and-play solutions. It takes people 15 minutes or less to set them up, have them up and running, have them integrated, have log volumes tuned. All of that can be done in a matter of minutes. I once asked a customer, how easy it was to set up one of our boxes, and he responded with a question. He said, "What's easier than easy?" So compared to the open source world, where again, if you're deploying Bro at scale in a large organization, that's going to take you weeks, months. In some cases, we've even seen multi-year long deployments. It's a dramatic time saving and ease of use. So we're almost at time here, so I want to leave some time for questions. Corelight, I'll talk a little bit about Corelight as a company, why we're able to achieve these advantages here you see on the left-hand column, why the performance advantages are so much higher than the open source world. Well, we kind of have an unfair advantage. Corelight was co-founded by the inventor of Bro and some of its key open source contributors. So Vern Paxton is actually our chief scientist, and some of the key open source contributors are also Corelight employees. And they realized that in their consulting kind of roles in years past, where they were helping people with open source, that there was a business opportunity to build a actual commercial solution that could make all of this automatic and scale their knowledge and scale their expertise across organizations. And so that's what they did, and they founded Corelight. And our engineers spent a good year finding the perfect marriage of hardware and software tweaks to the open source Bro code to be able to get those kind of performance gains that you're seeing with Corelight sensors. And so that's who Corelight is. We are a San Francisco-based company. We have offices across the US and also now in people in Europe as well. So we're expanding globally. And if you're interested in Bro, it's very easy to get a proof of concept going in your environment, whether that's a lab or a production environment. We've got our sensors, which we can ship out to you for a risk-free trial. And yeah, it's very easy with Corelight to get Bro up and running fast and performant and secure and all of the great enterprise features you would want and expect in a commercial security tool. So with that, I'll leave it open for questions.
All right, thank you, John. So it looks like we did receive a few questions during the presentation. As a reminder, feel free to submit any questions that you have to all panelists in the chat. We will do our best to get to all the questions that we can. So let's jump right in.
All right, well, we've got a couple questions coming in. Let's see here. And again, you can ask a question in the chat box there. Just send it to the panelists and we'll see it. So we've got a question here. It's, would you consider Bro an intrusion detection system? Yes and no. Bro, I think, as I explained, is a highly flexible platform. You can just do so much with it. And some people do configure it in that way, so they really take advantage of the scripting and alerting capabilities of Bro. Bro has what's called the Bro Intelligence Framework, which is a mechanism basically to use third-party intelligence feeds to import them into Bro. So Bro's traffic analysis gets married to the intelligence feeds, and you can generate alerts out of that combination. So there are certainly some people out there that are using Bro in an IDS-like capability set. And I think that question might also come from one of the kind of names of Bro in the earlier years. And in fact, I think the Twitter handle still might be Bro IDS. For a while, Bro was kind of branded as Bro IDS. But I would say today, really, at least for the customers we see at Corelight, and we do get to see a broad cross-section of organizations, large and small, all around the world who are using open source Bro. I would say primarily it's not being used as an IDS system. It's really being used as a data generation tool for network traffic analysis with some custom scripting layered in some cases. So it's often deployed in parallel with an IDS or an IPS. I think, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, Bro can really make your threat detection technology better because it can allow you to basically tune it and take control back over those alerts, because a lot of people these days have just a huge queue of alerts in their security operations center that are not being addressed because they just don't have the human bandwidth to get through all of them. And so if you've got all these tools you've invested in, like an IDS system that are generating these alerts, and you don't have enough people to go through them, Bro is a really complementary solution in that case, because it can give you the data and the fast insight to be able to tune down those alerts and make intelligent decisions based on facts, not guesswork, because suddenly that, that is a false positive because you looked into the Bro logs and you found out, that was actually just an authenticated user doing something a little bit strange, but that wasn't actually a true threat detection alert. And a great example of that actually is one of our customers, a university customer, I believe, was looking at an IDS alert that didn't really make sense. They thought the IDS was basically telling them they were getting DDoSed, and something about that didn't make sense. So they looked into the Bro logs and actually realized that the IDS got the directionality of the attack wrong. And what was happening is there was actually someone inside their system talking out and trying to hide themselves in a way that I guess looked like a DDoS attack. But that's a great example of how Bro can really enhance a security solution like an IDS. So I hope that answers that question. Let's see here. We got a question here about deployment. So Bro Corelight deployment. I'm assuming the best location for Bro or Corelight is at the internet border. Is that right? Yes, we often see border deployments. For Bro, getting that north-south visibility about what's talking out to the public internet and what's talking back into your internal environment. However, I'd say Bro is just as equally powerful inside your network for east-west visibility, right? Those things that are not at the border, that are systems and servers and internal spaces within your organization that are talking to each other that never cross that border. We see a lot of people using Bro for that internal visibility, which is especially important for tracking lateral movement, right? Because typically the initial penetration, sure, that comes from the border. But once they're inside your environment, they're inside, and they're figuring out how to map your systems and break into all of the systems and move laterally within your environment. Bro is a fantastic tool for internal east-west visibility. So yep, definitely border deployments, great place to put Bro, but also I would say Bro belongs inside your network as well as an east-west visibility tool. Let's see, we got some other questions here. Would you consider Bro a replacement for NetFlow? What about PCAP? I would say from a security context, Bro, from a security use case, I should say, Bro can definitely replace NetFlow. NetFlow, though, is used by network performance monitoring engineers. So there's some use cases where it might not be appropriate, but from a security context, we looked at that Bro log earlier in this presentation. Bro can definitely replace NetFlow in that security use case world. PCAP, that's a little trickier to answer. Sometimes there are some things you need to know about what happened that the Bro log doesn't contain that information. We ask our customers this a lot, and we think that kind of the rule of thumb is the vast majority, somewhere between 80 to 90%, based on customer conversations we've had, where they're collecting PCAP and also generating Bro logs in their environment. 80 to 90% of most security questions can be answered with the Bro logs themselves, and it's really it's a minority of instances where they're needing to actually go into the raw PCAP files themselves. The great thing with Bro is once you figure out what the high-level story is, if you do need to go to PCAP, Bro can point you in the right direction, so you're not spending 6 hours trying to beat the story out of PCAP in Wireshark. You can use the Bro logs to basically triangulate where you should be looking in the PCAP file and then quickly go drill into that PCAP file. So in some cases, Bro can probably replace PCAP. In cases where you don't have the budget to collect PCAP beyond a few days, I would say Bro can really give you that storage capability to get 80 to 90% of the insight of PCAP for basically as long as you want to store it, because we're talking about a reduction in data size of 1 to 2 orders of magnitude compared to PCAP. Bro logs aren't small by any means, but they're much, much smaller than full PCAP files. So there's one organization we know of that's been storing their Bro logs for over a decade, which basically gives them a time machine into their network, and they can go back in time and ask really interesting questions like, hey, this was discovered in this year. Well, was it affecting us 3 years ago? They can answer that kind of question because they've been storing Bro logs. So it depends on your environment. In some cases, it might be an appropriate wholesale replacement for PCAP, but often it's a complementary solution where you're also collecting PCAP, and Bro can give you the big picture most of the time, and then some of the time you might need to go to your PCAP files. Let's see here. Let's see, we've got a question about false positives. How much false positives should one expect, and can it be fine-tuned? So Bro itself, open source Bro itself out of the box is not going to be generating any sort of detections. It can generate detections, but you're going to have to configure it to do that. So the Bro intelligence framework that I mentioned, where you basically are integrating third-party intelligence feeds against Bro's traffic analysis, that can generate alerts. Bro scripts, right? You can use community Bro scripts, like the Bitcoin detector, for example. Those are going to generate alerts. You can write your own Bro scripts that are specific to your environment or specific to known, indicators of compromise. Those are going to generate alerts. All of those things, though, those are things you would have to configure. So it's very difficult for me to answer that question about false positives. I would say that the benefit of Bro, right, is that it's highly inspectable and tunable. A lot of those security solutions out there that you're using today are generating what I would call alerts in a vacuum, which means that they're not really showing you the full logic of how they got to that alert. They generate an alert, they give you metadata related to that alert, but often really an alert is just the first stop in an exercise of puzzle solving, right? Like we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So Bro can be finely tuned, controlled, and inspected in ways that your commercial threat detection solutions typically can't be. So really, the false positives are going to depend on what threat intelligence feeds you're integrating with Bro, what scripts you're running. But at the end of the day, I would say it's a far better, your ability to control false positives in this world with Bro is much, much better, because you can actually look at the logic and customize it to however you like. Let's see here, we've got a bunch of questions. So let's take this one here. How does Bro deal with encrypted traffic? What kind of insights can be generated if most traffic is encrypted? Great question, common question we get about Bro. So first I'll talk about kind of traffic makeup. I think you'd be shocked at how much unencrypted traffic there is in a typical environment, maybe even in your own environment, in places where you don't currently have network visibility into that traffic. We've, again, seen a wide cross-section of organizations globally. There is a ton of unencrypted traffic out there. So the first thing I would say is it's rare to find an environment that's just completely encrypted or 80% encrypted. There's still a ton of unencrypted traffic out there. Now, when it comes to encrypted traffic, Bro has a couple of different layers of insight it can provide. So first is there's an SSL log that gets generated. So that contains fields with details about the SSL certificates and connection characteristics of the SSL client that are very helpful in a security context. So the SSL log itself can actually give you a lot of great data that allows you to basically make inferences or track certificates in your environment, right? I mentioned the JA3 Bro script that Salesforce developers got together and made that allows you to basically fingerprint and track SSL clients within your environment. So there's still a ton of insight you can get from those logs that's helpful in a security context. So we really see a lot of organizations using that SSL log to do, or the JA3 script to do just that. And the second part I would say is that some customers have decided that they want to break the encryption. Now, Bro itself isn't capable of doing that, but of course there's other solutions like at the packet broker layer where you can actually decrypt the traffic itself. And so that's kind of been another way that people are using Bro is feeding it the decrypted data by using another tool to make that decryption. Let's see here, got a couple other questions. How about this one here? We have a question about Bro use in the broader security community. Someone's wondering, are other security vendors using Bro? The answer to that is yes, definitely. Bro is open source, it's free. I believe it's a BDL open source license, which means other organizations can use it, commercialize the solution. So yeah, there's actually a lot of security vendors out there that are using Bro under the hood, I would say. The two key differences between those uses of Bro and what Corelight's doing is they're using Bro as kind of a data input, typically one of many data inputs, and they're typically focused more on the upstream security analytics and providing you with a nice GUI. Corelight's focus is squarely on making Bro just as enterprise grade and easy to deploy and awesome as possible. So those companies are really just using Bro as an input and not a product. And the difference that approach means is that typically those companies are not actually giving you the Bro logs, or if they are, they're giving you a subset of those Bro logs. So they're not trying to expose all that Bro data to you. They're trying to use it for their own security analytics capabilities and then give you the alerts. Whereas Corelight is squarely focused on making sure that you get the highly comprehensive logs with minimal to zero packet loss into your SIEM or data lake. And then the second thing is typically those solutions are not allowing you to configure Bro in the ways that are powerful, right? You're not going to be able to run Bro scripts and those security tools. So really, Corelight's focus is really squarely on making Bro awesome, deployable, secure, enterprise grade, where other security vendors who use Bro under the hood are typically not talking about it, not exposing it, and often run into huge performance challenges. We've heard that a lot. I mentioned that our engineers spent a good year finding the perfect software tweaks and hardware marriage to get the performance gains you see in our products. The same challenges that large organizations running open source Bro deployments run into with performance, those security vendors get hit with those too. So we often see that security vendors using Bro under the hood tend to have performance issues above 2, 3, 4 gigabit per second throughput traffic. Let's see here. Let's see. Got a question here about sensor sizing. So someone says, I've got 18 offices all over the US. What am I looking at for deployment in terms of sensors there? So typically, yes, you're looking at one sensor per site. Corelight, if you're buying a commercial solution from Corelight, we have that 2 gigabit per second sensor, which is designed for smaller remote offices or factory floors with, throughput traffic that's, at or below 2 gigabits per second. So that AP 200 sensor is a great sensor for that kind of use case if you're dealing with a bunch of smaller offices where you need to deploy a sensor per site. Let's see here. Someone asked about slides. I'll just quickly answer that. Yep, the recording of this broadcast will be made available as well as the slides, so you'll have access to those as well. Let's see. We have a question about file extraction here. Someone was asking, is dumping extracted files into a sandbox something that is technically feasible and able to be maintained from the sandbox, or do you have to selectively put extracted files into a sandbox environment? So typically for our product, we make it very easy to basically point the file extraction capability into your sandbox or into a commercial tool like a file analysis framework tool like FireEye. So with Corelight, it's very easy to do that. In the open source world, it can be a little bit trickier. There's also kind of performance issues with file extraction in the open source world, where typically what we see is there's a trade-off where if you enable the file extraction capabilities in the open source Bro deployments, it typically negatively impacts some of the protocol parsing functionality, and there's a lot of packet loss that occurs. We had one customer, for example, that was running a pretty large-scale open source Bro deployment, and I believe they had file extraction enabled. And they thought that they had some packet loss. They weren't quite sure, and they put one of our boxes side by side with their open source implementation and realized that they were dropping like 40% of traffic, and they just didn't have any visibility into that. So file extraction, yes, technically feasible to point Bro's file extraction capabilities into a sandbox environment. It's trickier on the open source side, especially at scale, because it can impact the Bro's logging functionality. Let's see here. I think we have time for a few more questions. How long does it typically take to set up Bro? So it totally depends. If you're trying to run Bro at home or just get it stood up in a lab environment, typically a lot of people's first exposure to open source Bro is through Security Onion. Bro is baked in and part of Security Onion. So in that case, if you're running it at home or a small lab environment, not long, a couple days. But if you're looking to scale open source Bro at an organization of really any size, I would say above 100 plus employees or a couple sites, it can get tricky fast. On average, I would say it's weeks to months to get open source Bro configured and deployed. Even years. I mentioned earlier in this presentation, there's a very large technology company that we all know that runs Bro, and I think their total deployment time was about 2 years. It's just hard. Bro has a lot of edge cases, weird things that can happen at scale that are tricky to deal with, which is why Corelight is such an attractive solution for a lot of people, because again, 15 minutes, that's not hyperbole. We've had people set it up even faster than that. We've really just engineered it to be dead simple to set up. We've taken care of all the headaches of tuning Bro that you would have to deal with in the open source environment. Let's see here. What are some definitive complementary tools that we should be running with Bro? That's a great question. I can tell you what I've seen personally with kind of leading organizations running Bro and complementary tool sets alongside them. So kind of table stakes is a SIM or a custom data lake, right? So, Splunk is a very popular SIM that many people on this call might already be using. We've got Elastic Search as well. Humio is another. We actually just did a webcast with them earlier this week. They're a SIM log management solution. So table stakes, complementary tools, you're going to need somewhere to store, manage, and process the data. That might be a commercial SIM tool. That might be an open source kind of data lake tool. That's just table stakes. But beyond that, to really kind of make Bro fully extend in your environment, you're typically seeing some sort of integration with a security analytics framework. So an example of that on the open source side would be RITA, which is RITA, Real Intelligence Threat Analysis. I might be misquoting that acronym. That's a pretty popular one that we see. So people are basically setting up Bro in their environment and integrating it with Rita. And Rita is a sophisticated security analytics tool that runs on top of the Bro logs and gives you really, as I understand it, great kind of alerting capabilities around, DNS traffic, for example, and a whole suite of things. You're probably going to want some sort of file analysis framework tool to go with Bro, because Bro is simply extracting and reassembling the files. So you're going to want to hook that up to some sort of analysis framework that's going to actually be able to make sense of those files from a maliciousness standpoint. Because Bro is really policy neutral is kind of how we talk about what Bro does. Is Bro's job is primarily to describe what's happening in a policy neutral way. And on top of that, you can enable Bro to make decisions and opinions on top of that data, but Bro is really at its core just giving you the facts. So the complementary tools that I would say go well with Bro are all those tools that are basically taking the facts that Bro gives you, whether that's a Bro log or a file extraction, and trying to make some sort of assessment or opinion about that. So whether that's Rita or a file analysis framework tool like FireEye, those are the tools that Bro can feed. And you saw that stack diagram earlier in this presentation. If you're making that sort of decision in your organization, everything upstream is going to get better. And it contrasts sharply to organizations that have basically, I would say, implemented a detection first strategy where they've invested in these security tools that are generating threat alerts, and they're basically grabbing network data on an opportunistic basis wherever they can, which is of course kind of patchwork, incomplete, hard to solve that puzzle. That's kind of the way I would say most organizations today are doing it. But if you're looking at re-architecting your system, that new network security stack diagram that was shown earlier is we're increasingly seeing that happening. And these organizations are basically saying, we're going to start with a principle of great network insight first, and then we're going to layer on all of the other tool sets on top of that. But we're not going to do that until we have great visibility that we can control. And they basically take that architecture and stamp it across their organization. So if they have multiple offices, they'll take that network security stack diagram I showed you and basically implement it again and again and again across all of their offices or traffic aggregation sites to give themselves that consistent layer of visibility in all of their network traffic. Got a question here. I think maybe this is time for the last question. Andrea, do we have a time check?
Yeah, we can answer one more real quick.
Okay, great. Is Corelight planning on offering any kind of professional certifications or courses on open source or commercial Bro? We definitely, are aware that I've talked to people that have learned Bro themselves, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of online videos and this blog and that blog. We're aware that there's not a consolidated source of kind of training program necessarily about Bro. So we're definitely looking at ways that we, because Corelight, again, is hugely committed to keeping open source Bro powerful, open source, and widely used. So, we've made donations to the open source project. We have full-time developers in-house at our company that are just doing open source development. And also, yes, we are looking at ways that we can enhance and scale Bro education, both open source and commercial use of our product. For now, I would say the best way to get access to kind of the knowledge that we have is to do a POC and get access to our support team and our engineers, because I don't think there's anyone in the world that knows more about Bro than the people that work at Corelight. So with that, I think that'll be the last question for the day. Thank you, everyone, for dialing in. And thank you, Pentester TV, for having me today.
Fantastic. John, thank you for joining us to discuss all of Bro's capabilities. If any of the attendees still have any questions or you'd like to learn more, you can head over to corelight.com or contact info@corelight.com. You may also watch a demo and interviews with Corelight on Pentester Academy TV's YouTube channel or our blog. We hope to see you guys at the next Pentester Academy webinar.